Hello, and welcome to the Fear Channel, a channel with regular broadcasts telling the most chilling of urban legends, ghost stories, and forays into the darkest corners of the human mind. Those faint of heart or prone to night terrors should proceed at their own risk. Tonight's story is Beasts of Ruby Valley, Nevada.
I've only shared this one with a few people, and still when I think about it, it freaks me the fuck out. I was 19 at the time, and growing up in a small town, exploring out in the hills was the thing to do. This incident took place at the north end of Ruby Valley, in Elko County, Nevada. Someday I'll play around on Google Earth to try and find the place, but it's slightly north of the road off Highway 93 that goes into Ruby Valley. I always like checking out old mine shafts and ghost towns. That shit really intrigues me. At the Burger Bar in Wells, Nevada, the area where I'm from and grew up, they had these old turn-of-the-century maps under the glass on the tables. On one of them it showed several ghost towns just north of Ruby Valley, so I figured I'd go check them out, as I had not been in the area very often. I gassed up my '72 Dodge W200 pickup and grabbed my HK91 and set out. I had found some old foundations in the lower country, and started heading into the mountains themselves to start finding some abandoned mine shafts. Shit was pretty cool, so I kept going up. I took this ancient road that was no more than an overgrown cattle path by this point in time, and came upon a tree blocking the road. It was an old pinyon pine about 2 feet in diameter that blocked the way. After the tree, the road continued straight for about 200 yards, then hooked right before coming back 180 degrees. I parked my truck in front of the tree and set out on foot. I grabbed my HK91 with a 20-round magazine in the rifle and put one 20-round mag in my left back pocket. I always had my rifle with me, as I've encountered mountain lions in the mine shafts before. That and I generally enjoy shooting. I get up on the ridge lines and shoot some boulders from a couple hundred yards away just for practice. I'm no sharpshooter, but I fancy myself as a bit of a marksman. As soon as I climbed over the fallen tree, I had a fucking creepy feeling as if I was being watched. Call me crazy, but that actually spurred me on. I continued for about 200 yards to the point where the road started curving right and gaining elevation, going towards the cabin. At this point I had the reaction that not only did I feel like I was being watched, but I also noticed that it was dead fucking quiet out. This was June or so, and school had been out for a while. Everywhere you went, you could hear those fucking cicadas, but not here. It seemed as soon as I had crossed the fallen tree, the mountains went silent. No bugs, no birds, nothing. Just deafening silence. As I came up to the turn, there was this big fucking rock. The thing had to be about 15 feet in diameter. You could tell that it used to be on the road, but due to years of erosion, snow and all that, it had just slid down slightly off the road. It seemed to be red limestone or something like that. It stood out since they aren't that common in this area. I looked at the rock and you could tell that there were carvings in there at some point, but due to weathering, it looked as if whatever had been carved there had been worn off. I kept walking up the road, being creeped out like fuck, but I really wanted to check out the old cabin, as it was pretty obvious no one had been here in quite a while. At this point, I was probably 3 hours off the main road. I got up to the cabin, and as far as abandoned houses go, and cabins in Nevada go, this one was in pretty good shape. All of the glass on the windows was still intact, and there were remnants of curtains behind the windows. I went in the cabin, and that is where I started to get the feeling that something was off. Most cabins you find out in the middle of nowhere in Nevada are barren. Nothing left, really. Maybe some broken furniture. This one was completely furnished. Time had taken its toll, but everything was still there. What was left of an old mattress and bedding was still there. There were plates and other cookware throughout the house, along with tattered clothing and personal effects such as a chest, faded pictures and the like. What really creeped me the fuck out was at the dinner table. It was set for 4 people. Dinner plate, glasses, and silverware. This was the first cabin I had ever found that was in this condition. It was as if whoever resided here had just up and left everything behind. That kind of gave me the feeling that I should not be in the cabin, so I went outside to see if I could find the mine shaft or anything else. Once I was out the door, I decided to chamber around on my HK91. The sound of me racking around in echoed throughout the canyon and broke the silence. As little of a thing as it was, this calmed my nerves down immensely. Directly behind the cabin was a well. It was still intact, and as I got closer, it sounded like there was noise coming from it, like a slight breeze rustling through. When I got within 30 feet of the well, I started to smell something. It smelled absolutely fucking putrid. Definitely something had died in the well. The smell of decay was heavy in the air, with an acrid copper scent that tore at my nostrils. I did not want to get any closer to it, and started walking towards the left, where I could see the opening to a mine shaft up on the hill. The closer I got to it, I could start feeling a breeze coming out of it. This is not really uncommon if you have explored mine shafts before, as the breeze could be coming in from another opening for the mine. But the thing was, it was perfectly calm. As far as I could see, there were no trees moving, or any signs of wind. As I got closer, another thing that struck me as odd was that the breeze coming out of the shaft was hot. Most of the time it's cool, as most mine shafts maintain a constant temperature. The closer I got to the shaft, the slower I moved towards it. Nothing since I crossed the fallen tree seemed right. As I got closer to the opening of the mine shaft, that feeling of dread and that feeling of being watched just got stronger. I got within about 15 feet of the shaft when the fucking smell hit me. It was the smell of decay and copper, but much stronger than the well. Right then, all of my senses started going off. I had to get out of there. I started turning left to book it when I saw a dark shadow moving in the opening of the mine shaft. Whatever it was, it had to crouch down in order to fit inside. Now keep in mind, most mine shafts are 8 to 10 feet tall, so this thing had to be pretty big. My first instinct was that it was a mountain lion, but then I remembered how big the fucking shafts were. Whatever it was, this thing had to be huge. My mind raced trying to think what the fuck it was. It was too big to be a black bear. Those are rare in northeastern Nevada. I nearly froze with panic, and it slowly kept coming towards the opening of the mine shaft. It was probably within 12 feet of the opening, and the light was starting to show whatever the fuck it was. It was covered from head to toe in grayish-brown fur. Then it fucking screamed. It was unlike anything I had ever heard in my fucking life. My ears were ringing from it. My fight-or-flight reflexes kicked in instantaneously, and I did what any good country boy would do. I fucking shot it. I pulled up my HK-91, placed the front blade on what appeared to be its center mass, and ripped off 5 rounds as fast as I could accurately shoot. If you've ever shot big game with a large caliber rifle, you know the sound when you connect with something. I heard 4 solid thwunks, and 1 round that went high. This made it scream even louder than it already had. At this time I started hearing more and separate screams coming from over in the well, and in the hills above the mine shaft. I started running down the hill as fast as I fucking could. In the tree line above the road, approximately 125 yards away, I could see fast movement. Rocks were tumbling down the hill, and there were several other screams. From the mine shaft, I could hear the wailing of whatever the fuck I had shot. Whatever it was, I had definitely connected, and it was hurting. Whatever it was up in the tree line, they were running from tree to tree on all 4s, getting closer to me. As I ran towards the rock, I was shooting in the general vicinity of the movement on top of the hill. By the time I got to the limestone rock, I had expended the 20-round mag in the rifle. I ripped it out and put in my spare magazine, chambered around, and started sprinting towards the fallen tree, approximately 200 yards away by now. I kept glancing back, and whatever they were staying in the trees. I could make out their masses and fur, but they would not stay in the open. I got back to the fallen tree and ate shit trying to jump over it. My hands were all scraped up from breaking my fall. If they hadn't, I would have practically broken my face. I got up off my ass, fired between 12 and 15 rounds at the closest movement, which was approximately 50 yards away by now. I heard a few rounds connect, and whatever it was started screaming louder. Between the screaming and gunshots, my ears were damn near deaf. I opened the door of my truck and got the fuck in and started up as fast as I could. Backing up, turning around, I damn near put myself down in the canyon. As I started going forward to leave on the road I came in on, That was when I finally got to look at one of them. It was crouched over, peering out from behind one of the trees. It was covered from head to toe in grayish-brown fur, with long, slender fingers with claws tipping off of them. The back of it was all hunched, and the face was slender, most closely resembling that of a badger, but its eyes were sunken in. It was shaking its head back and forth and sounded like it was attempting to speak, but it was so garbled. And with the noise of my truck, I couldn't make out what the fuck it was saying. I averaged about 50 to 60 miles per hour on that shitty dirt road that I had done 15 on the way in. I did not slow down or stop until I got back to the pavement. By now I was so shaken I had to stop and collect myself. I got back to town and was in a bit of a shock. My dad had been a guide in the Ruby Mountains for about 20 years. He asked me how my trip went and where I went. He could tell I was startled and asked where I had been. I told him I had been north of Ruby Valley. He got quiet and asked if I had seen a cabin with a fallen tree over the road. I told him yes. He just sort of sighed and said, "Yeah, there's a few like that." Then he looked me dead in the eyes and told me that is somewhere I should never go again, especially alone. He didn't have to tell me twice. I never wanted to go back there again. I didn't even think about it until a few years later. I tried researching it a bit just recently, asking some old-timers, and one of them told me a story about the rubies. I'll be quick on it. During the 40s and 50s, the Army Air Corps operated out of Wendover Air Base. Every now and then during shit weather, a B-25, B-17, or B-29 would smack into the rubies due to poor visibility. Some of the local ranchers got recruited to help the military go up to a crash site during the winter to recover some of the bodies. The rancher I was talking to told me that it took them about 3 days to get up to where the crash was on horseback and recover them. He said that when they got to the wreckage, all of the crew members were laid out, side by side, next to each other in a clearing. It was apparent all of them had died on impact, but many of them had severed limbs that appeared to be removed after the crash. Somehow they ended up laid out next to each other with their limbs severed. This was at nearly 10,000 feet elevation too. Whatever's up there, it knows how to get around. And it's been up there for a damn long time too.